אוקיי, ערב טוב לכולם, ברוכים הבאים. סשן לייב של קליבלנד, שהוא תכלס לא רק קליבלנד. אז היום אנחנו מארחים את נאג'י, שנאג'י הוא שמאי באזור קליבלנד. אנחנו עושים את הערב הזה ביוזמתו והובלתו של גסטון, יכירנו, גסטון תעשה שלום. ואנחנו בעצם הולכים עוד רגע לשמוע הרצאה על שמאות הנדל"ן, אוקיי? על איך בעצם הבנק מסתכל על הנכסים שלנו, איך הקונים מסתכלים על הנכסים, איך אנחנו בעצם כדאי לנו לחשב את השווי של הנכסים. אני חושב שזה שידור מאוד משמעותי וחשוב למי שרוצה לעשות נדל"ן בעצמו. זהו, אז בואו נתחיל. Hey Naji, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Excited to have you here. So, yeah, so we obviously are here to speak appraisal, right? To speak home values and ARVs. So I think what we're going to do, we're going to just give you a mic and you just go ahead and share your magic with everyone present. And by the end of this time, 40-45 minutes, we're going to go to question and answers session. And that's pretty much
the
it.
audience, please write the questions you have so we can present them to Naji at the end. Hopefully we can answer all of them. If not, then Naji can give us his mail, his contact, and he can answer offline. I'm sure there's not going to be answered all the questions because it's going to take like 3 hours or more. But we can do it offline also, if you'd like. So Naji, yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so hello everyone, my name is Naji. I'm from, I'm not from Cleveland area, but I currently live in the Cleveland area myself. I've been an appraiser for coming on to 2 years now. I've been in the field for several now, about 4 years. And I have my own business over here that I run in Cleveland. As I'm sure you guys all know, Cleveland is a pretty hot market.
Sorry, this is our fault. Sorry about that. Hey guys, כל מי שלא במיוט, שימו את עצמכם במיוט בבקשה, לפני שאני שולח את גסטון.
תאכל את החביתה. שושי.
אני מרימה. אוקיי.
אני פה, שלום.
Sorry about that. Yeah, go ahead, Naji.
Yeah, so as I was saying, so as I'm sure a lot of you know, Cleveland particularly is a pretty hot market right now in terms of investing, or it has been for quite some time, with certain financial factors coming into play right now with the overall US economy. It has slowed down, I would say, but I would also say that the majority of people I see purchasing houses now are investors, people who are looking to hold a property for a short term rather than a long term, more people who are looking to do a more short-term investment in terms of either flipping a property or cashing out, so they don't have to pay the higher interest rates. In terms of where appraisers come into play, we're essentially the market valuation experts. So we tell you what your home is worth. We tell you the things that your home needs in order to improve its value. If you're looking for a property, we are the ones who pretty much tell you how the neighborhood is, how the market is in that area. And we utilize a variety of tools to help us achieve a credible and objective opinion of value. I stress the word objective because the way it works with appraisers is that there can be no bias in our appraisal. So we cannot be influenced by outside people. We cannot have any kind of investment in this appraisal. So if I, for example, knew someone who I worked with who, let's say we both wanted to purchase a property together, I could not appraise that property even though I am certified, because I have a financial interest in the property. So it would be in my interest financially to appraise the property higher and try to make it a higher appraisal. The other part of an appraisal is, as I mentioned before, is that it's credible. And by credible, it means it's supported. So I can't just pull a random number and say, you know what, this property is worth this much. I have to be able to prove it. I have to be able to explain why the number that I came up with is the number that I came up with. Like I said, we use a variety of tools. In terms of what we do for appraisal these days, the more popular way we do is called the sales comparison analysis. So that's something I'm sure everyone here has heard of. Essentially, we find properties that are similar to the property, as similar to the property as we can find in the area, and we take the values of those properties, we make adjustments to certain criteria, such as the bedrooms, such as the square footage, the bathrooms, the condition of the property, and so on. And based off of that, we come up with an opinion of value. And I say opinion because different appraisers might come up with a different number. It's not always the same. In terms of, I know I had a discussion with Gaston not too long ago regarding items that add more value to a home. There are specific items that add more value to a home than others. I've dealt with certain people who will buy a property that's not in very good shape, and they'll add, like, you know, they'll paint the house, for example. They'll add maybe some newer flooring, not the best, but some newer flooring, and then they'll call it a day. You know, let's say they bought the house for $50,000 and they expect the house, after they did what they did, to appraise for $100,000, and that's usually not the case. Depending on the market, depending on the location, there might not be any change in value. If anything, it might even go down depending on what the market is doing at the time. So when it comes to working on houses and trying to increase the value of a home, in terms of what increases the value most in a home, I would tell you, in the interior of a house, there are certain areas that are used more frequently than others, obviously. So the kitchen is a huge one. If you're going to try to increase the value of a property, updating the kitchen is one of the priorities a lot of people put on it. And by updating, I don't just mean, you know, polishing the floors, maybe cleaning up a bit. I mean, putting brand new counters in granite or quartz, putting in vinyl flooring, or even hardwood tile, for example, brand new appliances, fresh paint, that kind of stuff. That all adds value to the kitchen and therefore, by extension, the home itself. The other place also would be the bathroom. Obviously, everyone uses the bathroom. So updating the bathroom also tends to give you a very big ROI. Based on my research, I can actually give you guys a pretty solid number for that, actually. The ROI on a bathroom, for every dollar that you spend on a bathroom, this is average, but you can typically expect $1.75 or $1.71 back for every dollar that you spend. So it's pretty much like 171% ROI, which is why the bathroom is usually a big component in a rehab. For the rest of the house,
bathroom, sorry, Najib.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Bathroom will have more weight than the kitchen? That's what you're saying?
Not necessarily, but the kitchen, what I will say to you is that usually with the kitchen, your ROI is about 70%. That's just an average. So sometimes more, sometimes less. It really depends on the area. So what I tend to find in the areas that there are certain locations around the Cleveland area where you'll find a lot of the same kind of house. So it's very similar layout. It looks almost exactly the same from the outside. And they've updated the bathroom, the kitchen, the bedrooms, they put new flooring in and whatnot, and the values tend to come out around the same. So what we're seeing here, the reason why I don't tell you to focus too much on that number is only because those numbers that I find are if I ever need to do manual adjustments. The reason why I say that is because, for example, let's say you found a property somewhere that's in a very strange area. Like there's nothing around that area that anyone has really updated. It's all older houses, but you want to fix up your house. If I can't find any houses in that area that reflect the updates that you want to put into the house, at that point, I have to make manual adjustments. So I'll look at the amount of money that you're putting into the property, how much you're planning on spending on each aspect of the house, and then I apply those ROIs. I add them all up, and then I add them as an adjustment manually. And then that will adjust the value of the home. It's rare that I have to do that. I prefer not to, because it's easier to justify a value that is supported by other sales versus just the number that I researched, because again, it has to do with my own research. So ideally what a person would do in those situations is find sales comparables that support that value. One of the most important aspects of appraisal is selecting the comparables, because if you don't select good comparables, then the value is not as credible. You can't support it as well. Now, what do I mean by that? So let's say, for example, and this is just for the math's sake. So let's say we have a house. It's a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. And this house, is 1,000 square feet. Okay. Let's say it has a 2-car garage. Let's say it's an average condition, no updates. It's an older house, let's say built in 1950, for example. So with a house like this, when it comes to certain aspects of what you're looking for in the property, square footage is one of them, obviously. The more house you have, the more it's valued. That's typically how it works. So when I'm looking for comparables, I have to find comparables that bracket certain things on the property. So for example, the bedrooms, the bathrooms, the square footage. And what I mean by bracket is, in certain cases, you want to find one that has less than the property and one that has more. And then the property will be in the middle. So for example, if the property is 1,000 square feet, I'll try to find a property that's like between 800 to 1,000 square feet. And then I'll try to find another property that's between 1,000 and 1,200, for example. Again,
1 second, Najee. How far you go backwards? It's 1 year, it's 6 months. And what's the radius of the properties that you are putting as a comp? Is it 0.2 miles, 0.5 miles?
Okay, so the way that works, when it comes to those two things, for the radius, the closer the better. I started a 1/4 mile and I work my way out. Ideally, not further than 1 mile, because the further you get, then you start getting into other cities and other towns nearby, and the value could easily be fluctuating. Because we have areas in Cleveland here, for example, where right next to each other, there's one property, there's one city where the average housing prices are like 100,000 and below. And there's right next door, like literally right across the street, is a much more improved area of Cleveland, and the houses are 500,000 and up. So depending on the area that you're in, the closer it is to the subject, the better. In terms of the time frame, the closer the better. So I like to start at, I would say 90 days to 180 days. So 3 to 6 months back, and not more than that. If I have to, I will. But bear in mind, obviously, the farther back you go, the less credible it is, because if you go back a year and you say, hey, listen, I found a property that sold a year ago for this much, there's no guarantee that it would be as supportive for now, because again, a lot happens in a year. The prices could be inclining, the prices could be declining. And if the prices were one thing back then, it doesn't mean they're going to be the same now. So let's say the house sold July 1st. I will try to find a house that sold ideally in June, March, latest. I wouldn't like to go anything further than that, just because the further back you go, the less credible that opinion becomes.
Okay, can you tell us, I mean, what items does not affect on the property value? And they are,
sure.
and they can be expensive, like putting in your driveway, putting in your roof, building a new garage, 1-car garage, 2-car garage, attached garage, detached garage, and so forth. Because I'm pretty sure people here have, when you're taking a comp, some people will say, hey, but this has an attached garage and the other one has a detached garage. What's the difference? You understand what I mean? Okay.
Absolutely. So a couple of things to keep in mind. So when it comes to items that do or don't add value, let's say if we're going to focus on items that don't add as much value, it needs to be known that this is it fluctuates based on the location. So if you're in a location where the majority of properties are higher end, so they're more expensive, they're better condition, all that stuff, it might change. variation. But for example, you're asking about detached versus attached. As a general guideline, attached garages are superior to detached for obvious reasons. It's nice to be able to pull into your house and just get out from the garage into your house directly instead of getting out, closing the door, going into your house. It's very different. So usually if you have an attached garage versus a detached garage, it's more favorable. In terms of driveway, no driveway, to be honest with you, I personally haven't found any evidence that having a driveway versus not having a driveway is a huge deal, only in the sense that if you don't have a garage and you don't have a driveway and you're parking on the street anyways, it's not a huge value improvement because sure, you can park in the driveway, but having a garage is really what's going to help you in terms of the value. So for example, spending $15,000 to pour a whole driveway into the thing might not be worth it for you if you're not going to get a huge ROI on it, especially if there's no garage. If there's no garage to the driveway leads to, then it doesn't really matter at that point. Specifically in, the more rundown areas of Cleveland, I wouldn't say that is necessarily the case in a more higher end area.
Okay.
What's about your count?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
What is about the bedroom count, bathroom count?
Yes.
How does that affect the valuation number?
Maybe
Sure.
Naji,
So
you can do like a presentation. I mean, pull some I don't know, like a recent appraisal that you've done, and maybe you will explain, because I'm sure not everybody have seen this form before, and you can explain, here's the comps that I'm taking, here's the consideration that I'm taking, here's the adjustment that I'm making, just for people to understand how it looks like.
I might be able to pull something up. I typically can't show properties from other places, but what I can do potentially is pull up the property I did for you.
Oh yeah, sure. Here. Go ahead.
I can't remember which one it was. Was it in July? I think I did it in July.
Yeah, it's Heartland. Yeah, Heartland.
Heartland, that's what it was. Yeah. Okay, where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, let me see where it is. There we go. It's just there we go. Let's download that one. Let me see here. Waiting for it to download here.
In the meantime, I made several questions for you, which you're gonna keep.
No problem.
But it's gonna focus up in a very good way.
No
Just
problem.
yeah, I'm gonna keep them to the end.
I got you. Let me see if I can share my screen here. There should be a way to do that. Oh, here we go. Let's do this. Okay, let's see here. All right, so I should be sharing my screen right now. Can you guys see this?
We can see your screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, you can see. Okay, so this is Heartland right here. So this is the. Oops.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay. Let me see here. Okay, so let's go. Let's see.
I have also a question, with your permission. Do you also take in account like the square feet? For example, if there is a house that is 1,500 square feet, so you take like 400 up, 400 down, the same with the year. Is there any of these things that you also take in account? Yeah, so when it comes to the criteria that we mentioned, yes, I don't think I would go 400 square feet. That's usually a pretty big range. But what I do is I try to stay within 20% of the GLA, so the square footage. So let's say, for example, 1,500 square feet, I would typically go, let's say if it's a 1,500 square foot property, I would go maybe like up to 1,700, 1,750. And then I would go down about,
like 1350, 1300, something like that. Well, less than that, sorry, 1450, something like that. I don't have a huge variance in between just because I don't want there to be too much adjustment. The idea behind it is the less adjustments that I do, the more solid that value is. Because if I have to adjust a bunch of different things, it's shakier. So I'll explain more here. So if you see the report here, this is what I found for this property in particular. This is, as you can see here, this is the subject property with all the information there. And then these are the three comparables that I have over here. In terms of the property itself, if you take a look here, so I think I spoke to Gaston about this earlier, but if you notice here, for Heartland, there's 4 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. And the rest of these, they all have 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. So one of the questions we were talking about earlier was in terms of the amount of bedrooms how they're factoring in. So for bedrooms, after 3 bedrooms, typically there's no change in value for the bedrooms aspect. At that point, we just look at the square footage. Because after 4 bedrooms, we look at what a buyer looks at. So let's say I'm going to purchase a house and I found a house that's 3 bedrooms and I found another house that's 4 bedrooms. Most buyers don't really spend anything different when it comes to 3 to 4 bedrooms. But let's say there's one with 2 bedrooms and one with 3 bedrooms. Most people are willing to pay more to have 3 bedrooms because that's typically the standard layout for a house in Cleveland. So that's why you'll notice here, there's no adjustments for the bedrooms or bathrooms because there's the same amount of bathrooms and the bedrooms are 3 or 4. But if you notice below, I adjusted for this one here, the square footage. When it comes to the square footage adjustments, depending on the location, depending on the value of the homes, I usually adjust it between $20 to $40 a square foot. So in this case, it was $20. But also, if it's about 100 square feet or less of a difference between the properties, if you see here, I'm not going to adjust anything. It's not significant enough of a change in the square footage for me to adjust anything. Another thing you'll notice on the basement section here, when there's no basement for the property, first of all, that's not usually something that's very desired. Most people prefer to have a basement in their property for multiple reasons. So you're not going to find as many houses that have no basements. So that kind of narrows your search down. So I have to find houses that also do not have basements. Otherwise, there's a huge adjustment that has to be made because a house with a basement is superior in terms of desirability than a house without a basement. So that's another thing that we look at. That's very important in terms of the properties themselves. Another thing you'll notice here, for example, is the air conditioning. I'm sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, sorry, Naji. Can you please explain more about having the basement and valuation of
yes,
of a basement, if we have it like unfinished, finished, crawl space?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Project, because I
yeah,
it will be significant for the valuation, right?
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah. So in terms of the basement, the way we look at it, the majority of houses in Cleveland have basements. It's not an issue. A lot of times you'll find houses that have no basements in areas that are flood risks, because if the basement floods, it's a bigger issue in terms of the overall structure of the property. The house itself could incur more damage if has a basement versus if it's on a slab. A finished basement, it's very important to note that with a finished basement, it doesn't get added to the square footage of the property. A lot of homeowners make this, or sellers even, they make this mistake where they'll say, my house is 1,800 square feet, but what they don't tell you is that 600 of that is below ground. It's below grade. It doesn't count towards the square footage. So in reality, that person's house is 1,200 square feet above ground and then 600 below. Even if you finish your basement, it definitely does add value to the property. Having a finished basement, ventilation, carpeting if you want, or even vinyl flooring, making it almost habitable in a sense, it does add value to the property. I typically adjust the property depending on the property. I'll either add an adjustment for the square footage. So let's say, for example, it's a 700 square foot basement and it's completely finished. I usually add about $10 to $15 a square foot for that. So in terms of value. So let's say you had 700 square feet and I adjusted it, let's just say $10 a square foot. So that'll come out to $7,000 of additional value. So again, depending on the location, depending on where the property is, I always stress this because markets are different in different areas, which is part of part of the job of the appraiser is to find the market and see how the market reacts to certain things. There are certain locations where many houses have finished basements. So those locations will be different than another location where there's maybe one or two houses that have a finished basement for every 50 houses. So it really depends on the market. That's a huge aspect of my job is to study the market, study the trends, study the types of homes in that area and how they are impacted by their surroundings.
Okay, we can go on to the heating and cooling systems.
Sure. So when it comes to the heating and cooling, obviously having central air conditioning is a plus. It's favorable, it's preferred. Obviously having a house with both heat and cooling is definitely is superior in terms of desirability than a house that doesn't have cooling at all, especially in the summer like this. So typically we find with the average house in Cleveland, it adds about a $2,000 value to the property. So as you can see here, since Heartland did come with central air, the one property that didn't have central air, I adjusted at $2,000. Again, I try to find properties that are as close to this subject. So in this case, I found 2 properties that had central air, but this one did not. So I had to adjust it. It's pretty straightforward in terms of that. Honestly, depending on the property that you have, it is possible to purchase an air conditioner for around $2,000 and have it installed and all that, depending on the location and what kind of air conditioner you have, the amount of BTUs and whatnot. But typically speaking, you're looking at about a $2,000 increase in value. It might go as high as like 4,000, maybe even 6,000, but those are much higher value homes in general. All right, let's see. And then the garage, again, I spoke with Gaston about this, but essentially with garages, for every additional car that, in terms of the capacity, there's about a $2,000 change in value. So if you have a 1-car garage versus a 2-car garage, it's about $2,000 difference. So as you can see here, because these 2 comparables had a 2-car garage, I adjusted them $2,000 each in the negative because they have more than the property. In terms of the exterior, so let's say, for example, the porch, patio, and whatnot. So in my research that I found, typically speaking, for an average porch, a regular size porch, and by porch, I don't mean the small steps when you walk into a house, I mean an actual porch, one that you can sit on, you can put chairs out if you want. It's an actual porch. It typically expands the width of the house, so you can actually sit on the porch. It's not a small little step. For a porch, it usually is about 2% of the home's value, whatever that home is. So in this case, we don't have any porches on this property, but this is just an example. So 2% of, let's say, $100,000 home, that's $2,000 that it adds. In this case, Heartland didn't have any kind of exterior features, but we did have, the other ones all had features themselves. So as I said before, the porch is about 2%. A patio that's not covered is 1% usually. A deck, a regular wooden deck, is usually about 2% as well. And then it gets adjusted accordingly. So for example, you see here, we have 2 covered patios. The covered patios, because the patio is 1%, but a covered patio is obviously better. So I added another 1% to that. So these 2 covered patios were 2% each. And then you can see here for the deck, I put $1,250. And the reason why I put $1,250 was because the deck on this property in particular wasn't fully finished. So it was just a platform, essentially. It didn't have railings or anything like that. So in that case, I gave it half the value that I normally would give it. So it was only 1%. And then down here, you can see the exterior. So when a property, the average property in Ohio, well, Cleveland specifically, it's usually the exterior siding of the property is usually either brick, vinyl, or aluminum. There are wooden ones as well, but that's usually the case. So the most popular one that people usually use is vinyl or aluminum, and then brick is more favorable because obviously the material is more durable. So it's less maintenance for the property. The property on Heartland was a mixture of brick and vinyl. So depending on, because the properties that I found, some of them were fully brick, and I found one that bracketed the siding, which is why this one has no adjustment. But when it's fully brick, you have to compare it to the siding of the property. So let's say, for example, brick, I would say is about 2% of the property value in terms of the value contribution. So if vinyl is the point of reference, let's say the property was vinyl and the other property was brick, I would add a 2% adjustment to the brick property. So because Heartland was brick and vinyl, it was kind of half and half. I only added a 1% adjustment to the two fully brick properties. Is that making sense so far?
Yeah, sure. It's great.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I know it's a lot of math. It's a kind of a numbers game, but essentially, once you have certain points of reference, like I said, when I figure out what adds value, what doesn't add value, what the percentage is, or what the dollar amount is directly, then at that point, it's a matter of adjusting accordingly. It's not. It might look a bit more complicated, obviously, but when you have experience in it, it just becomes kind of second nature.
Got it.
Now, something I'm going to point out here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry about that. How would you adjust for another bathroom count?
Yes. So if the bathroom is above grade, so it's not in the basement, depending on whether it's a full or a half bath, for the majority of properties in Cleveland that are like around $100,000, it's typically, for a full bath, it's about $4,000. And then for a half bath, it's $2,000. Once the properties start climbing higher, so like $250,000 and above, it's like an extra $1,000, so $6,000 and $3,000. And then obviously, as you go higher, the property will be worth, the value will be worth more. If it's below grade, so like in a basement, for example, it's half of what the above grade is. So if I have a $4,000 bathroom above ground, if it's in the basement, it's $2,000.
Cool.
Overall, and something to keep in mind as well, because I've seen several properties where they'll say there's a half bathroom in the basement, or they'll say there's a full bathroom in the basement, but the bathroom has no sink. So they might just put like a little closet with a toilet in it, or a closet with a toilet and a small little shower. That doesn't count as a bathroom. There needs to be a sink as well. Another thing to note as well for bedrooms, because this is something that I feel like I've run into multiple times with other investors. A bedroom has certain minimum requirements. So in this case, the minimum requirements for a bedroom, at least in the United States, and specifically in Ohio, it needs to be a minimum of either 70 or 80 square feet. It can't be smaller than that. I believe it's 80, but let's just say 70 to be safe for now. I'm sorry, let's say 80, yeah, 80 square feet minimum for it to even be considered a bedroom. Anything smaller than that, it's not considered a bedroom. In addition to that, for the bedroom to be a bedroom, it needs to have, usually, it needs to have a closet as well, some kind of closet. And it needs to be able to be accessed from any of the common areas of the house, I'm sorry. So what that means essentially is, let's say you have a master bedroom and you go into the master bedroom and then there's another door and then there's like another room there. That doesn't count as a bedroom because you have to go through another bedroom to get to it. So
it's called tandem. It's called tandem bedroom.
Yeah, exactly. Those do not count as separate bedrooms. So if you had one of those in a 3-bedroom house, you can't say you have a 4-bedroom house. It's still a 3-bedroom house. In general, that's typically how these things go. Some people will have a doorway and then there's a room inside there and there's no closet and there's no door. And they say this is a bedroom. That's not a bedroom. So that's something important to keep in mind when looking at bedrooms and properties. In terms of, was there another question? I feel like I was answering something else. Was it
about this bedrooms? I mean, should they have, like you mentioned, closet, but they also supposed to be heated? They're supposed to have
absolutely
window.
100. Yeah.
And heated window and the and a closet. Yeah, that's what I know. The basic requirements for a room to be counted as a bedroom.
Yes. Another thing, since you mentioned that, so there are some properties that have like enclosed porches or like a 4-season room or something like that. For those places to be typically considered part of the GLA of the property, there needs to be, again, heating as well, and it needs to kind of conform with the property itself. So let's say, for example, you had a regular house and then someone built like a porch, but they closed it off. So like it has shelter from all 4 sides, it's all taken care of, but let's say it's wood and it's not heated. It wouldn't be considered a porch. It wouldn't be considered part of the house. It would be considered like a closed porch. It still adds value, but you can't factor it into the square footage of the house. That's another thing that I've seen some places do as well.
But if it does have a heat, so it does go with the total square footage.
If it has heat, it depends on the case, to be honest with you. I can't give you a complete yes or no, because a lot of times after they see that there's heating, we'll still look and see if it conforms with the rest of the house. So if it looks like it's still like a porch, but it's completely closed off, there's no access, it really depends. It depends on the quality of the construction. Sometimes we'll factor it into the GLA, but usually we don't. If it looks like it's obvious that it's not part of the house and it's kind of like separate, we typically don't include it in the GLA.
So same, I guess, with the sunrooms.
Sunrooms, more often than not, do not get factored into the GLA. Yeah.
Naji, I will ask a question that everybody wants to ask, probably. How a finished attic is considered? Like someone takes a 2-bedroom Cape Cod, and then they finish the 3rd floor. How it's considered? It's considered as a regular bedroom. How much it would add to the property? Are you comparing the county records, and then you see, okay, now livable space was 800 square feet, but now they added the attic, so it's like 1,100 square feet.
Yeah. So I see. Yeah. So there are some places, for example, the Cape Cod houses, which are usually like, there's the 1st floor, and then the 2nd floor is usually half of the square footage of the bottom floor. The way those work, some of them, the top part isn't finished. So it's technically an attic with stairs. You go into it, there's an attic. Those kind of properties, for example, if you finish the attic and it's heated, it's got, flooring, it's drywalled, all that stuff. If you finish that area, it does get factored into the GLA. Just keep in mind that because of the way the roofing is, you can't go all the way to where the roof meets the floor for it to be counted in the GLA. So the way that works is, let's say it's usually about half of the bottom.
You mean the eaves, the eaves of the roof, right?
Yeah. So essentially what happens is they say that up to a point where I'm trying to figure out, let me see if I can draw it for you. So maybe it'll make more sense here. Hold on. You guys can still see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And GLA stands for?
Gross living area, square footage, essentially.
Thanks.
Yeah. So okay, so let's say, hold on, sorry. Go back to the thing here. All right. So let's say this is the top floor here. It's a little hard, I'm drawing on the iPad here, but let's say this is the top floor here. So you wouldn't count all this here. Like we're looking at a cross section, right? Let's just say just so you guys have a reference, let's say this is the bed here. So you wouldn't measure across like this. You would measure in terms of the width of the upstairs from the point where the distance from the wall to the floor is 5 feet from both sides. So then you'd measure from here to here.
Where you're stuck with your head at the wall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's say, for example, I'm just going to draw like a sketch here of a house. So let's say the bottom here, let's say is 500 square feet. Okay. And then the 2nd floor is like the attic. So it's going to be about half. So it's going to be 250. Even if when you look outside, technically there's all this here too on the outside, but this is part of the slope right here. So that's not going to count. So this downstairs, all of it, 500, yes, but all here it's going to be 250. So the total square footage here is 750. So that's usually how it goes. With attics, we do usually include that in the GLA if they're totally finished. We don't really necessarily need to find another house with a finished attic. We can, but really what matters is the square footage. So as long as the GLA matches with like other properties in the area, that's really what matters.
Cool. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's yeah.
I have other questions. So first, to have a property to be counted as comparable sale, it's that property to be in the same school district and same zip code.
Ideally, yes. That's not always the case, but it's better for it to be that way. Yes.
Okay. What stands for the condition C1 to C4?
Yeah, I can actually show you that here as well. I mean, it was included in the appraisal report. Let me pull it up for you guys here. Where is it? Oh, I think maybe this wasn't included in this one. But essentially the way it works is the C conditions refer to the condition of the property itself. So for example, a C1 property is a new construction. Brand new. No one has ever lived in it. It's completely brand, like it's literally just been finished. It has a certificate of occupancy, but not a single person has lived in it yet. C2 is very similar. It's essentially new, like a couple years old. It's been lived in one, like pretty much one family has lived in it. It's been occupied, but it's essentially brand new. So if you bought a house brand new, you constructed it, you haven't even moved in yet, it's C1. You move in, you live for a year or two, you want to sell the house. It's now C2 because it's going to have some like normal wear and tear. It's kind of like when you buy a brand new car. Even if you take care of it for a year or two, there's going to be some normal wear on it. That's inevitable. Essentially, C3 is the highest that you can get with a house that's the majority of the houses here in Ohio. And what I mean by that is, let's say you bought a house that was built in 1970, for example, and you fix it up as if it's brand new. So like, it looks like if you walk inside the house, it looks like you just bought the house, it's brand new. But because the house itself is old, the condition of the property would still be considered C3, which is essentially updated. So when you guys buy a house and like completely rehab it, let's say you put $50,000 into it, and the property is completely brand new now, like in terms of the materials, you put new flooring, you put a new kitchen, new bathroom, carpeting, and so on. Once you take care of all of that, the property would be considered C3. The majority of houses in Cleveland are C4, which is just average. You go inside, it looks like it's an older house. Maybe it was updated in the last like 20, 30 years, but it's still not in the best condition. And then C5 and C6, I mean, those are essentially uninhabitable. I mean, if you go into a C5 building, it's like pretty much all you see is framework. You don't see any walls, you don't see any flooring, nothing. It's really bad. And C6 is essentially like it's a hazard. You can't even go inside it. It's dangerous.
So then, how is the C count affects our value?
Correct. So essentially, the C count is not going to be a huge factor in your guys' properties, only because the only time that really factors in is if I find a property that is not the same condition as your property. So if your property is considered C4, then I need to find properties that are C4. And if they are not, but I still need to use it, let's say I found one that's C3, then I would have to adjust the condition in this area here and explain why I put that number. And usually, like let's say, for example, I found two houses that were C4, okay? And let's say both of those houses were around $120,000. But then I found one house that was C3. It's pretty much the exact same as the other houses, but instead of 120,000, it was, let's say, 135,000. Okay? So typically, at that point, I would adjust the property, the third property, the condition, I would adjust it about $10,000 to $15,000. because based on the market, it's about $10,000 to $15,000 more than these ones. So for me to bring it down to a C4, it would need to be adjusted accordingly.
That's great.
There's a question here about main roads. If a house it's on a main road, like double the double yellow line versus like a side road which is more quiet, how would that affect the property?
So typically having a so actually, now that you bring it up, I can show you. So if you look here, you see here where it says location and then it says view. So 9 times out of 10, or I would even say 99 times out of 100 usually, the location is what this stands for here. So the N stands for neutral and res is residential. So the location typically for most houses is in a residential area, but you were asking what if it's in a busy road? So we have an option when we're selecting these to put busy road. And usually being on a busy road means that, you know, there's more noise, there's more congestion, there's more commotion in general. And that's usually less favorable for a person buying their house. You don't want to keep hearing cars driving by all day long, or trucks or honking or police cars or whatever. So it's considered an adverse condition. So what that means is, ideally, and this is rarely the case, honestly, but ideally I would find a house that's also on a busy road, and I would see if there's any difference in value between a house that's on a busy road that's close to my subject, and I would look at houses that are on more quiet residential roads, and I would just compare the differences. So let's say I found another house that's on a busy road, and let's say that house was worth $5,000 less. So then what would I do? If that property was worth $5,000 less, any property that was in a residential area, I would adjust it $5,000. Because the market has shown that properties that are on busy roads are about $5,000 less than properties that are in residential areas that are quieter.
Cool. How do you approach the different styles of the properties? I mean, like colonial, range, bungalow.
Yes, absolutely. So bungalows and Cape Cods are interchangeable. It's the same deal. Essentially, like I was describing before, a Cape Cod or bungalow property is typically one that has half the square footage on the second floor of the first floor. So whenever you see it's like 1.5 stories, that's a Cape Cod or a bungalow. A colonial is the same on each floor. So that's why if you notice here, you'll see I put 1.5 because it's 1.5 stories. A colonial is 2 full stories. In terms of adjusting, to be honest with you, in Cleveland particularly, there is no major value difference, which is why I don't put any adjustments for them. I have to put a 0 because it's technically still different than the subject, because the subject is a Cape Cod, whereas the comps, 2 of them here are colonials. So it's a 0 adjustment, but it doesn't really make much of a difference, at least in Cleveland. In other areas, I'm very sure that certain housing styles are more preferable, because some people would prefer one house on 1 floor versus 2 floors, especially if, let's say, they're older and they don't want to climb stairs, for example.
Like ranch houses.
Yeah, a ranch is 1 floor. A Cape Cod is 1.5, like I said. A colonial is 2. And there's something called a split level as well. There's other kinds of houses, but the main ones we deal with are the ranches, capes, and colonials.
How about the age of the dwelling? How much it's affecting the value?
So again, when it comes to those, I would have to look at similar properties that are of that. Ideally, when you look at neighborhoods, you'll find that the ages are relatively the same. It's not a huge difference. I tend to go 20 years in both ways. If it's more than 20, 25 years, one way or the other, I might want to look and see if there's a huge value difference. If there isn't, then I don't adjust. Because you have to keep in mind as well that the age of the property is not really what we're looking at. We're looking at the effective age, and the effective age is very different than the actual age, because you can have a property that, let's say, is 75 years old, but as you can see here, I put the effective age of your property as 40. The reason being is because the average home, the average economic life of a home, I should say, is about 90 years. So if you're constantly renewing the property, fixing foundational issues, replacing the roof, updating the materials inside, the property will last a lot longer than a house that was built one time and never touched. Like they never fixed anything, because over time a house wears down. So the reason why we don't really look at the actual age is because more often than not, the properties being compared all have a very similar effective age, which is really what we care about. How useful the property will remain. Because if you're constantly updating a property, even if it's 100 years old, it might have an effective age of only 30, because you completely rehabbed it, you completely fixed it up. So now it has they estimate there's another 60 years or so left in it, even though it's 100 years old technically. It's kind of similar to, let's say, if you bought a car that's really old, but you did a complete mod on it. You added a brand new engine, you fixed all the interior stuff. On the outside, it's an old car, but it'll still perform like a new car.
Put the car.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have just a couple of last questions.
Sure.
So you mentioned previously that you also count kitchen appliances in the valuation?
Yes and no. The reason why I say that is because usually when a person rehabs a home, part of the rehab and part of updating a kitchen is adding new appliances. Most people don't just sell a home and no appliances are there. They're usually included. Sometimes people will rent out a house and there's no appliances in there. But usually it's not a huge significant value difference, because if you want to put some mid-level appliances in there, it's not going to be tens of thousands of dollars. It's typically going to be maybe $1,000 or $2,000. So it's not a huge value difference. But essentially, when a person rehabs the property, they usually include the appliances in there just to kind of make it a whole, like an entire package.
Got it. And what's happened if you step into the house and you find out it's rented? Do you tend to use like an income approach in addition to sell approach?
Most lenders don't, unless they specify it. I don't use the income approach. The income approach is used mainly in multifamily properties, but even then, we only develop an opinion of value with the income approach, but the lender still tends to use the sales comparison, because again, the income approach is based on rents, and there's market rent, and then there's actual rent, and there's some other things that get factored into that as well, overall in terms of the area. So bottom line, essentially, the income approach is not very heavily relied upon at all, really. These days, lenders don't usually take it. They'll look at the sales comparison and then potentially the cost approach in very rare cases. And I don't think I've ever really heard of a case where the income approach was used.
Okay, cool. Gaston, I think, Naji, did we cover everything in your opinion?
I mean, if there were any other questions in terms of the value, at the end of the day, the way it works with properties, like I said, appraisers need to be objective in the way they go about the analysis. If we find an opinion of value, at the end of the day, like I said, we have to be able to support the number. So I've had investors who were not happy with the value that I gave them. I'm the kind of appraiser that I don't claim to be, the best appraiser. I think I do a very strong job at what I do. I really enjoy what I do. But if there are things that I miss, I'm always eager to see if there is indeed something, because a lot of times I'll get people who send me a dispute for the value that I gave them. They'll say, okay, we think it's worth more. And then they'll send me comparables. So when they send me comparables, I'll explain to them, I'll take each comparable and I'll write like an addendum inside the report before I send it back. And I'll tell them, okay, this property, this is why it's not a good comparable. This property, this is why it's not a good comparable. I explain and I show my work. I don't just say, you know what, no, I'm not going to use it. At the end of the day, the lender is going to go with the appraiser, but I'm the kind of person where I want the person who I'm appraising for to understand where I got that number. It's not that I'm, again, I don't want this number to be high or something. You know what I mean? That's not how appraisers have to be objective. So if a property does end up being better than one of the ones that I chose, I will tell them, you know what, this is better. I'm going to use it. And then I'll put it in the report and I'll adjust the value. I have no problem with that.
So basically, that's okay to get in touch with appraisal and tell him in a nice way, obviously, right?
Of
hey,
course.
you might be missing this and this and this.
Yeah. So the way it works is, if you ever did want to do a dispute, you don't contact the appraiser directly, because technically, unless you started the relationship directly with the appraiser, you have to go through the lender. So when, let's say, one of you guys ordered an appraisal, but you have to do it like the way Gaston did it. So he did it through like an appraisal management company. If he spoke to the lender and then the lender spoke to the company, they reach out to me and then I do the appraisal. I send it back to them. They give it to the lender. It's kind of a process. But then when you finally get it, let's say you're not happy with the number and you found things that you think are better, you send that, they give you a form. You send the form with the comparables to the lender, and then they send it back to me through the company. And then I explain whether they're better or not better, pretty much.
Naji, I have the $1 million question that I'm sure that everybody wants to ask this. You, as an appraiser, if you were an investor right now, okay? Please specify maybe 4 bullets, do's and don'ts. Like, nobody wants to over-improve the property because you won't get the value back. And nobody wants to under-improve that because you will get a lower appraisal. So you have to find the sweet spot on what to put in the property and what not to put in the property.
Okay.
I know it's a hard question, but try to, because this is the money time for the
I get you. So here's what I would say. In terms of making sure that you don't over-improve a property, that is a thing, because there is something called a super adequacy, which essentially it's like, for example, let's say you put brand new faucets in your home, okay? But instead of doing regular faucets, you decided to spend more money and you made them out of gold, or you bought brand new solid gold appliances, just because. The thing is, with those kind of things, most people are not willing to pay more for something like that. They don't care. Like a faucet is a faucet, a fridge is a fridge. After a certain point, it's all the same.
Light
so
fixtures.
The reason, light fixtures, for example, like overall, the idea behind appraisal, one of the principles that we learned in appraisal is something called the principle of substitution. And essentially, what I think I've told you this before, but essentially, we have to look at what buyers are willing to pay more for. If a buyer is willing to pay more for something in a house, then it's justifying the value difference. Most buyers are willing to pay more for a brand new kitchen, brand new bathrooms, new flooring, fresh paint, all that stuff. But they're not willing to pay for more, really, if you put, I don't know, a brand new fence in. They don't really care. You put a shed, who cares? I can buy a shed from Home Depot, $500. I don't need you to charge me $10,000 more because you put a shed in. You know what I mean? So the things to focus on in rehabbing a house, when you flip a house, kitchen, bathrooms, flooring, those are some of the main things. If you update, and when I mean update, I don't mean just putting in a newer, older kitchen. I mean update. So when I say update, granite, quartz, the newer materials for countertops, for example, more modern. So you want to modernize it. So newer materials, stainless steel appliances. You want to put a backsplash, for example, to make it look newer and fancier, for example. In terms of the bathroom, a lot of places I see, honestly, when you put tile in the shower, tile on the floor, that honestly gives it a nice, it just makes it look nicer, more clean. The bathroom is typically not a very clean place. So, it makes it look more presentable. Putting fresh carpeting or fresh flooring all over the property, very useful, especially carpeting in the bathrooms. Most people like to have, a cozier feeling in the bedroom versus outside in the hallway or in the living room area. You want to add value, honestly, yeah. Like if it's something that's prevalent in your area, why not finish the basement? Go for it. It's a nice addition to the house. Me personally, I love finished basements. If I ever buy a house, I'll probably have a nice finished basement. Only I'm allowed down there, by invitation only.
Man's cave. Okay.
Yeah, they call it a man cave. Things to not really worry about, to be honest with you.
What about siding outside, you know? All the outside items like siding, like fireplaces, fire pits, ponds,
Okay,
I don't know, whatever.
Landscaping, I wouldn't really focus on it. Not in Cleveland. Unless you're in a higher end area, sure. But in a place like Cleveland, no one really cares. You know, like I don't find this city overall as a very attractive city, and a lot of people feel the same way. So putting your money into exterior things, no. I think someone just asked about a garden. I wouldn't really put that much effort into a garden. Adding a porch, for example, yes. Adding a back deck, sure. Adding having a place with a fireplace. Fireplaces don't add value, really. Not really in this area anyways. A fire pit, that's mainly cosmetic, doesn't really do much. In terms of really, as long as you focus on those main things, I'm not saying the other things won't add like a nice overall feel to the house, but if you're looking for the most bang for your buck, you got to focus on those main things. It's kind of like when someone tells you they want to go to the gym, right? And they, instead of telling you to focus on all these little mini exercises, they tell you focus on the main moves that work the most of your body, right? You know, upper body, lower body, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Same deal with houses. Focus on the main components: kitchen, bedrooms, flooring, paint, that kind of stuff. And believe me, the rest of it falls into place. A lot of times, even some people, and I've noticed this, and this helps too, instead of spending like thousands of dollars on brand new flooring, they'll sand the floor down and they'll just restain it or repolish it. It makes it look like it's almost brand new. And it's much cheaper than having to rip out all the flooring and put brand new flooring in. So, I mean, a person, depending on what location you're in, having, what's the word? You can put about $20,000 to $30,000 strategically into a house, and it's more than enough. I've seen people fix up houses for $20,000, and their return on that house anywhere between $30,000 to $40,000, even $50,000 extra on top of what they put in. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's a way to see the chat, because I think some people have been messaging the group. I saw a question, so I figured I might as well ask them.
Yeah, on the chat, someone asking about the siding and the exterior paint, like if the house has new siding or new fresh painted. So
okay. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna go through these really quick because I just saw there's a bunch of questions. You might as well answer these. So the first question, I don't know if they're still here, but how do you compare or evaluate a house that is renovated? What are you looking? Okay, well, I mean, that we talked about that.
We just talked about it, right?
Yeah, the difference between finished and unfinished basement is around $7,000. It varies. Like I said, it depends on the location, but on average, I usually adjust downstairs. It's based on the values in the area. So I'm not about to adjust a basement 30 square feet, $30 a square feet, if I'm adjusting the house is only $20. Usually I adjust half of what's above. So if the houses are higher in value, let's say it's a $500,000 house, and I'm adjusting the square footage by 60 or 70 dollars a square foot, then below grade in the basement, I'll be adjusting $30, $35 a square foot. So you do the math. In terms of the main road, I think we talked about that. You were talking about like being on a busy road. We talked about that. Okay. Fireplaces, like I said, doesn't add a huge value. If it comes with it, great. If it doesn't come with it, don't spend the extra money to put it in. It's not a huge deal. What else? We talked about, so we talked about the C, but someone was asking about Q4 and whatnot. Again, yeah, that's the quality of the house. Q4 is the average right now. In terms of a property overall, you're not going to really see a lot of Q3s. It's either Q1, C1, or, Q4, C4, C3. Garage versus no garage, we went over that, but essentially it's not a huge difference in price. A couple $1,000s per car. That's usually how it goes. Lot sizes, if it's a significant lot size difference, I will adjust it. And there's two ways I adjust the lots. So if it's like a huge lot, like let's say your subject is on a lot that's like 20,000 square feet, and all the other properties are like 10, 15, or even let's say 5 or 10,000 square feet. Usually I'll look at the market values of both properties because it's in the county records. So if let's say the subject property is $20,000 for that lot and the comparable is $10,000, I'll adjust $10,000. If it's not a huge difference in price, but the square footage, like the square footage is a lot, sometimes I'll adjust between like $1 to $3 a square foot of the lot. Gardens, we said, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Siding does affect the appraisal, but again, like I said, it depends on the area. The more popular is vinyl, it's not going to make a huge difference. But if the house is brick, the actual house is brick, it's better in terms of the siding because it's less maintenance and it's more durable. It's not going to wear down as much as vinyl or aluminum, for example. Aluminum rusts.
No, I think the question was if they replaced the whole siding. I mean, it's a vinyl siding and it was deteriorated. And now they have installed in brand new siding.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's not going to be a huge difference. If you left the outside just as it is, left it average looking, but you updated the inside, it's a huge difference. It's not going to make as big of a difference. It's mainly curb appeal. So if someone drove up to a house and saw brand new siding, it's nice. But like I said, that comes up to the discretion of the buyer. If they decide they want to dish out an extra couple $1,000s in the rehab, they'll probably recoup it if there's enough of a profit margin. But all I'm saying is that's not a priority. The siding, I wouldn't say is a priority. If you wanted to do something for the siding, just power wash it, maybe give it a fresh paint coat. That's about it. And then the last question I saw here, mechanicals add any value? They do. It's just kind of hard to put a number on it, especially because it's going to be hard for me to find a comparable property that has, let's say, a new furnace. Unless in the listing it says we added a new furnace like yesterday, for example. You know what I mean? So things that will add more that are not as obvious, like a roof typically does add more value. If I can't find a new property with a roof and the investor like makes it clear, hey, listen, I added a new roof, then I will at least adjust it somehow manually. I'll add something to it. I think that was all the questions so far.
Yeah, you covered everything pretty much. This is a huge,
Naji, how do you adjust for a new roof price?
So typically what I'll do is oftentimes, honestly, because the average value of a roof is about $6,000 for the average home here. Again, just average home, not the big ones. So I'll usually adjust about $6,000, assuming I don't find a property has a relatively new roof. And by relatively new, I mean within the last few years. So if they put it in 2020, I'm not going to say, oh, that's old. It's still, because a roof typically lasts about 15 years, 20 years before it might need some maintenance. Most people don't replace the entire roof unless they have to.
Got it. Well, that's kind of concern that I have right now. I have a property with an older roof, which lasts just a couple of years left on that. And I'm thinking, I'm trying to cut my budget. Right, but maybe I'm gonna go ahead. It's gonna be around $6,000. They're gonna replace or put a second layer of the shingles, and I'm gonna get it back appraisal, and it's gonna be more desirable to the buyer. And I'm gonna 100%. So it's a win-win-win.
Something to keep in mind, because a lot of people they misconstrue. Like when I tell someone I need to inspect the property, they start thinking I'm a home inspector. I'm not a home inspector, because home inspectors are for buyers and appraisers are usually for sellers. So the way it works is, as an appraiser, we observe things. We don't necessarily inspect to the degree that home inspectors do. And the reason why I mention that is because a typical buyer is going to look at your roof. If he sees major wear and tear, shingles missing, it's maybe collapsing a little bit, they're not going to want it. But if they look at a roof and they see a roof that looks like it's a regular roof, maybe you just power washed it to make sure there's no extra dirt on there or whatever, they're not going to care. That's why usually when I look at the property, if I see like the roof is fine, I'm not gonna sit there and say, well, when did you put it in? Did you put it in 10 years ago or 2 years ago? It doesn't matter to that point. Not in Cleveland anyways.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool, okay. אם יש למישהו שאלות, אתם מוזמנים לכתוב בצ'אט או פשוט לפתוח את המיקרופון ולדבר.
Does it matter if what type of roof is it? Like if it's a composition shingles or gravel?
Not really. The average house, it's not going to matter. I've seen people wanting to put in higher quality materials into the house. In some cases, it helps. With the roof, I wouldn't say so. Just do the regular asphalt or shingle, whatever it is that you normally do. It's not going to be a huge difference in terms of the value return on that. That's one of the things I would say not to get too caught up in.
what about property that has the same characters as the comps in terms of layout and condition and everything, but it's much larger than the others, and larger by 1,000 square feet, much larger.
I wouldn't even consider it.
You won't consider it that it's larger? It will
Way
be
too
the
big.
same price as the comparable?
It's not that it would be the same price, but what makes
You
the
want to
comparable
just
sale?
the price per square feet, right?
Yes, but here's the thing: if I found a house, if it's bigger, are you asking if the comparable or the subject? Like, is the property bigger,
No,
or
the subject is bigger than the comparable, and it's much bigger. But it has the same layout, it has the same condition, it has the same everything, but then the price per square feet, if I calculate it, but the price per square feet, it gives me a very high ARV.
So in that situation, the comparables that are chosen are not good comparables, because there should not be that big of a variance in the square footage. 1,000 square feet bigger, that's not a good comparable. That's like comparing a hatchback car to like an SUV. That doesn't make sense. A good appraiser would never use a property that's 1,000 square feet more, at least not a single family property, because that's a huge difference, and it doesn't support the value. Couple hundred square feet, yes, but yeah.
So for comparables, will he use other properties that are the same square feet but has different layout? I mean, so that you will use by the same name. Okay.
Yeah, because the living area matters more than how the living area is set out. So if I had to choose between one or the other, like let's say there's one 3-story house and one 1-story house, but they're both the same square footage, it doesn't matter as much as the square footage in general, because I would rather choose a 3-story house to compare to a 1-story, but they're very close in square footage, than take 2 1-story houses and one is 1,000 square feet more. It's not a good comparable. It doesn't it doesn't support the value.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
More questions?
Any other questions? Like I said, I really enjoy what I do. So this is
So in this case, I have another question. So let's say that the property had changed the garage to an extra living area and turned it into a studio.
Okay.
But the other comparables around doesn't have this feature. So how do you approach this kind of situation?
Okay, so in Cleveland, anyways, it's very rare to see that. I know that there are some places that people do that. In terms of that kind of thing, to be honest with you, if anything, if it would add any value, which it usually probably wouldn't. Are you talking about a studio like a guest house almost, or do you mean just like a study area?
No, I mean like living area that is separate from the main house. The garage was transferred into this kind of living space. It's small, but it's a studio, like a studio apartment.
But is it attached or is it detached?
Detached.
It's detached? Okay. Yeah. To be honest with you, I've never dealt with that myself. I don't know if they would add any kind of extra value for that, because it won't be part of the square footage of the house for sure. It's completely separate. And again, they're going to ask you, is it heated? Is it cooled? Is it finished? Does it have electricity? All that stuff. If you took care of all that stuff,
totally believable.
Okay, so then it might be considered an ADU, which is an accessory dwelling unit. It's separate from the property. It still wouldn't be factored into the square footage of the overall property. But what they would probably do is speak to the person who built it and ask them what like how much it costs for them to put that all together, and then they would do some research on the average return on ADUs, for example. But they would have to put a lot of language in the report and explain, like, I could not find any property, this is very unique, so on and so forth, and explain. One of the things that people need to know about appraisal reports is that there's a lot of things that appraisers can do in terms of valuing, and they have flexibility in a lot of things. We just have to support it. We just have to explain. Like, we can't just say, here's $10,000 adjustment and here's the new value. Okay, they're going to ask you why. Why did you do 10,000, not 5 or not 15? So as long as somewhere in the report, someone said, you know, this person made a studio, you know, and this is how much they used. This is what they did. This is how it is. This area does not have that, but it added X amount of dollars value because 1, 2, 3. As long as you explain, as long as the appraiser is able to explain the value reasoning, then it's not a problem. Although my recommendation, if someone wants to make a studio, I would recommend to them, instead of doing a studio outside the house, just finish your basement. Put that money toward finishing your basement. It's a bigger ROI.
I have a tricky question.
Sure, I like tricky questions.
How would you refer to 2 houses on the same lot? We often see that,
yes,
you know, they build 2 houses. Now you got a problem getting the comps because it's not so common.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I told you it's tricky.
Yeah, so in those cases, to be honest with you, I've heard people say things like it's a 2-unit property, because technically, as long as it's on the same lot, it's on the same parcel, they have to be appraised together. You can't appraise one without the other. They have to both be appraised, and they both have to be factored in their value. In these cases, the main thing you'd have to do is just look. You'd have to, like, as an appraiser, I would have to look in the area and find properties that are close by that have a similar unique feature. And if I can't, personally, I've had that issue, and I passed it on to a more knowledgeable appraiser, because if one of the rules in being an appraiser is that you have to have competency in your assignment. That's one of the principles. So if you're not competent enough to do that, you don't have the knowledge to do it, you have to make sure you let them know that you don't. And then you have to show them that if you take the assignment, you have to tell them, listen, like, I had to consult so-and-so, and I had to talk to so-and-so, and they helped me, and this is the value that I got. Mm-hmm. But for me, just because it's a lot of trouble, to be honest, and it's very rare, I just pass. I tell them, ask someone else, you know, someone who has more experience than me. Yeah.
Interesting.
Honestly, it's the safest thing to do for me, because if I mess up something and my license gets reviewed, they might suspend it for some reason. They're not nice people sometimes, the board. So I'd rather not risk my license for a couple $100.
Oh, of course, yeah. I was just asking, you know, question, that it seems to be tricky, and it is tricky indeed.
It is. I honestly, I would, unless the person knows what they're doing, if they find a deal with 2 properties on the same parcel, if they do not have comparables ready to go, I wouldn't even bother. I wouldn't even bother putting the money into it. It's just so rare. You don't see that. So it's more often that you see a house that's built on a parcel, and then there's an extra parcel next to it that technically gets factored into the whole appraisal. That's more popular.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I have a quick question. I don't know if you covered it. Is it worthwhile to add another bath? If you have like a bath and a half, and is it worthwhile? You said something about the basement. I'm just asking, does it cope up?
Yeah, so adding another bathroom absolutely adds value to the property. It's way more desirable. At the end of the day, it's always better to have more than one bathroom in your house. In terms of where the bathroom is, that's where the value kind of fluctuates. So if you decide to put another bathroom in your basement, it still helps. But like I said, it usually comes out to about half the value of an above ground bathroom, because again, the basement doesn't get factored into the improvements above ground.
How about if you make it like a master suite? The bathroom is
downstairs or upstairs?
Or upstairs. I mean, upstairs.
So
not in the basement.
Upstairs, so if you do it in the basement, like the main rule of thumb to look at when it comes to those kind of things, if it's below grade, meaning in the basement, it's not going to be as valuable as above grade. Even if you literally made a whole kitchen downstairs and you added all this extra stuff, some people like that. It's like an in-law suite, you know, like some people want that, and it will add value. It will definitely add value. overall, but it won't be as much as if you did it upstairs. So just to keep in mind. But as a general rule of thumb, yes, adding bedrooms, adding bathrooms overall does add value. But like I said, after 4 bedrooms, the value doesn't change. Not in my experience of the bedrooms. But obviously, if there's more square footage, that's where you look at into the value as well.
Any more questions?
Anyone, any other questions? Me and Gaston were synchronized.
Yeah, I noticed.
Naji, how can people contact you? Maybe you can leave like a business card,
Yeah,
something that people
absolutely,
can contact you for question, maybe.
Here. What I can do is, I think there's a way for me, I don't know if I can access the chat. I'm on my iPad right now, so I need to see if there's a way for me to, there's a way
you
to
can share it or put it on the chat. That could be
okay,
great.
hold on. If I can do that, let me just make sure I know, where is the chat? Hold on. More, I think it might be there. Oh, there it is. Okay. Let me see if I can, should be a way to do this. Select photos. Okay, let me see here.
It's gonna be Naji the Great.
Thank you. All right, let me see here. I think there should be a way to do this. All right, I know I have it on my desktop. There it is. Okay, there's a way to do this. Maybe I can just copy it. Okay. There we go. This should work. I just sent it to the chat, and it's just the easiest way to do it is just my business card.
Yep. Was it? Oh, okay. Certified.
So that should have, yeah. I'm actually in the process of renewing my license, and I'm actually going to be applying to be put on the FHA roster as well. So I'll be FHA certified for, I don't know how much you guys know about the FHA mortgages, but those are ones where you have to put less money down in terms of that. Some people like to use them for house hacking, but it definitely helps. There's more there's more requirements to actually have a house that is FHA insured, but it might open up some doors. So see how that goes.
Most of us are not eligible to do this kind of FHA loan. So
yeah, true.
It's out of the scope for us.
Yeah.
Naji,
yep.
how long does it take to be appraiser? I mean, this is very interesting to understand how you got to it. It looks like you love your job, but I just want to understand how you got to it and how hard it was.
It's honestly the hardest part about becoming an appraiser is finding a sponsor. And the reason being is because you need to be able to work under a certified appraiser who sponsors your work and pretty much shows you the ropes. You have to work about 1,500 hours to be a certified appraiser. There's different levels. The lowest level is licensed, and then certified general. I did the middle one just because I don't really have any kind of desire to be a general appraiser. But you have to take some courses. You have to log 1,500 hours under a certified appraiser. And it takes a minimum of 1 year because you can't go faster than that. And that's after you take your courses, some of them, and become a registered appraiser assistant. It's a process, as you can tell. It took me about 2 years, and I was working with someone who I knew personally. He's my brother's father-in-law. So that's my connection pretty much, because it's not easy to just find some random appraiser who will agree to help you.
How about commercial appraisals? Is that a different?
It is. Yeah, that would be under a general appraiser. So that requires double the amount of hours. And I think double or triple the amount of coursework, at least double the amount of coursework. There's more you have to put into that. And it's more intensive. But yeah, I mean, they technically make more money because obviously I'm sure commercial appraisals cost more. But the nice part about being a business owner is that I can set my rates, and I have a network of people I work with. And once they see the quality of my work, they don't see a need to ask around anymore. They just come to me. So.
Cool. Well, I think if we don't have any more questions, we will start to finishing this one, and we wanna appreciate your time and a lot of
thank you very much.
You bring us during that 1.5 hours. It's been amazing. It's been fun, and seems you love it. So we also love it as well now.
Yeah, I got
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, please feel free. My email and my my phone number open to you guys. You can send me a text. I answer my text messages. I answer all my emails. So
cool.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I look forward to working with you guys. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye bye.
See you guys.
See you.